On today's Locked On Giants podcast, why should we have hope that the New York Giants offensive line is going to be better this year? I'll tell you about that and more coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for the New York Giants team page, Giants on SI. Find our written work over at si.com/NFL/Giants. And a welcome on in to my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Always good to see you. And I hope everybody had a great weekend, a somber Memorial Day weekend, as we remember those who sacrificed for us. But on today's Locked On Giants podcast, we are going to take a look at why there is reason to be optimistic that the New York Giants offensive line is going to be better in 2024 than it's been in a while. Then we're going to transition and we're going to take a look at some players who are going to benefit from the various coaching changes that have been made in the offseason by head coach Brian Daboll. Who's going to benefit and why? We'll talk about that. And then we'll close things off by doing a salary cap update. June 1st is rapidly approaching. We should be getting a decision on Darren Waller's status. And assuming he does retire, which I still say is going to be the case, what can the Giants do with the cap space that they're going to gain from the Waller savings? So that is our program for today on the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, welcome on in. And as always, let's get started because we always have a lot to talk about. All right, let's talk about the offensive line, everybody's favorite topic, because this unit has just been such a mess, for lack of a better term, for the last, I don't know how many years. I mean, gosh, I can't remember the last time the unit was really that good. I think I'd have to go back to 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, that time period when the offensive line, you can honestly say that the Giants offensive line was a strength. So what happened, obviously, how we got to this point, the regime of Jerry Reese kind of ignored the position. They tried to bleed out as much as they could from the veterans, but didn't really work to replace those guys, give the coaching staff a chance to develop some young players to get them ready so that they had continuity. So what happened? The unit fell apart. It's kind of like the pass rush unit. They took the same approach with the pass rush unit. They traded away Jason Pierre-Paul, who was the last of the homegrown pass rushers, and they tried to, plug in with free agents, and that didn't work. And now they've gone back to their basics, and they've gone back to, trying to build that up with some homegrown talent, supplemented, of course, with, veterans like Brian Burns and whatnot. But basically, they've gone back to the basics. So getting back to the offensive line. The Giants, last year, Andrew Thomas, we know, was hurt. We know John Michael Schmitz was hurt. Those were two crippling injuries for the Giants. I think, Thomas was never quite the same once he suffered that hamstring strain. And I think he had something else later on in the year that he was working through. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. John Michael Schmitz had the shoulder issue, which was a problem. And then he missed the game because of the shin. But the big problem for the Giants offensive line was a lack of developed depth. So why do I think then that this year is going to be better? Because new offensive line coach Carmen Bricillo has a plan as far as developing this offensive line. All right. Now, here's the first thing we have to take note of. And this is based on observations from the OTA that we were at last week. And we're going to talk to Bricillo, by the way, this week at the next open OTA, which is on Thursday. But Brasillo, and as I've learned, and as hopefully you guys have learned if you're everydayers, we've had guests on from who cover the Raiders and who are familiar with Carmen Brasillo. Brasillo's plan is to cross-train. Now, you can say that, oh, the Giants always cross-train. Every team cross-trains. Well, yes and no. Brasillo, his plan is to cross-train any player who is not considered a consensus top 5 at his position. So, for example, Andrew Thomas is not going to cross-train. He is a top 5 player at left tackle. I don't think John Michael Schmitz is going to cross-train. Even though he's not quite top 5, basically he plays a specialized position for that offensive line at center. So he's probably going to focus on getting better at that position. But every other guy on that offensive line, and that includes Evan Neal, even though the coaches haven't confirmed this, but this is just a gut feeling I had based on my reading the tea leaves and the little whispers and stuff I'm hearing. Everyone on that line is going to cross-train, which is going to give them more options. Now, here's the thing. When you cross-train these guys, you better find your combination sooner than later. One of the mistakes the Giants made last year with the offensive line is they kept flip-flopping guys and trying different combinations till it got really, really late in training camp. All right. They were still futzing around with the offensive line, the starting 5, into the first week of the regular season when they were supposed to be getting ready. That is not going to happen this year. I'm fairly confident when I say that. They're going to have a certain point where they say, okay, we've been experimenting throughout the spring. We've seen, this is how John Runyon looks at left guard versus right guard. Jermaine Illuminor, he looks best at, say, for example, left guard as opposed to right guard. So they're going to have a better idea so that when they come to training camp, that unit is not going to necessarily be flip-flopped as much as it was last year. The flip-flopping to me just was a bad look on the coaching because it just basically said that they really didn't have an idea as to what they wanted to do or what they wanted that line to look like, or maybe they were just being too fussy. I don't know, but it wasn't really a good look and it didn't help the line when they had to get together and play. All right. The Giants are also, and this is a big thing, in my opinion, they are building this offensive line correctly, sort of. There's an asterisk here. Now, ideally, you want to put young guys on your offensive line, put them on cost control contracts, and build up, develop them so that they become a cohesive unit. Unfortunately, because of the circumstances and the fact that this Giants team has to hit the ground running, especially on offense, they're not in that position really to do that. So what did they do? They sign veterans who are going to be amongst the starters. So whether it's Illuminor and Runyon, whether it's Aaron Stinney and Runyon, or Schlottman and Runyon, however they work it out, you're going to have veterans. Now, here's the beauty part of it. The veterans that they brought in are all pretty much on cost-effective contracts, not rookie deals per se, but they're cost-effective. All right. So you look at the contracts that offensive linemen were getting in free agency. I mean, they were getting paid outrageous sums. The Giants really didn't pay anybody, an amount on that offensive line that you could say, oh my gosh, what a huge contract. So they're kind of taking, a mix, if you will, sort of like, okay, we got these young veterans coming in on somewhat cost control contracts. Let's get this unit up and running, and the sooner the better. Okay, so the other thing, like I said, I don't think they're going to drag this out, the starting 5 and then the backups that they want. Brian Daboll was asked about that at the OTA last week, and he said, look, when it happens, it happens. Sorry, I'm not buying it. They've got to have a rough idea as to when they want that line solidified. You can't drag it out indefinitely. And I think, or I would hope, that that's a lesson that they learned from last year, because it was just a disaster. All of a sudden now you're throwing Joshua Ezeudu at left tackle, who hadn't worked there all summer long. I mean, then all of a sudden you're starting him in week 2 after Andrew Thomas went down with his injury. How does that make sense? You talk about the role of the coaches and what their responsibility is. Their responsibility is to put their guys in the best possible position to succeed. The Giants, when it came to the offensive line, did not do that last year. This year, I think that's going to change. I really do. And look, I say this every year. I go into, the spring and the summer optimistic that the offensive line will be better, only to have my heart broken and my hopes crushed. So, why do I feel differently this year? A little bit differently. I think Carmen Brasillo will straighten out this unit. Will it happen right away? Maybe. I don't expect them to go from being worst to first in terms of, rankings or anything like that. But I do think that this unit will be a lot more functional than it has been in recent years. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, who are some of the players that are going to benefit from the coaching changes that were made at various spots on this team? I'll tell you who and why right after this. Hey, Giant fans, with the dead period coming up in the NFL calendar, I'm really looking forward to catching some shows and concerts in the area. And no matter what I end up choosing, I never have to worry about being shut out thanks to Game Time. With Game Time, there are always great seats available at competitive prices right up until the start of the event and even after. Game Time offers last-minute deals that can save you even more, and they take away the guesswork that comes with the buying experience. Game Time offers clear seat views and event cancellation protection. Plus, if you find tickets elsewhere in the same section and row for less, Game Time will give you 110% of the difference. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Chaina, and coming up this week on the Locked On Giants podcast, we're going to hear from Max Chadwick of Pro Football Focus. They like to pop in on the podcast every so often, so we go over, expectations for the Giants, grades, all that stuff. So he'll be on the program at some point this week. Then, of course, we have coming up on Thursday, OTA number 5. So that is open to the media. That means I will have, on Friday, I will have a review for you. Actually, I'll put it up on Thursday, but I will have all my takeaways and observations from OTA number 5. So those are some of the things coming up here on Locked On Giants. Thank you so much for being part of it. All right, in this segment, who are some of the players who are going to potentially benefit from some of the coaching changes that were made in the offseason? Now, Brian Daboll made some changes to his staff. Some were because guys quit or left for other positions. Some were because they just needed, a change of scenery, or, they just weren't performing up to snuff. So I have a couple on defense and a couple on offense that I want to talk about. All right. On defense, with the new defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, I think one guy off the top of my head who is going to benefit from the change in scenery, or the change in coaching rather, is DE/outside linebacker Boogie Basham. Now, you'll remember last year, the Giants traded for Boogie Basham towards the end of the summer. And Boogie never really made it onto the field much that season. It was almost as though, they acquired him, and Wink Martindale, then the defensive coordinator, just didn't have a plan for him. Or maybe it was because Wink Martindale didn't want to sit down Jihad Ward, who of course was, a favorite of his. Whatever the case might be, Boogie Basham stands to potentially have a bigger role on this defense if he delivers the goods. Now, the Giants primarily were a 3-man front last year under Wink Martindale. This year, you will probably see a 4th man come down on the line, whether that's Brian Burns, who will probably be that fourth man. And then Boogie Basham has an opportunity, I think, to potentially relieve Brian Burns if he has to come off the field. And I know that, you're saying to yourself, well, why would the Giants want to take Brian Burns off the field? I'm just saying if they have to, Boogie Basham might be a better fit for the front that Shane Bowen looks like he's going to run, as opposed to what Wink Martindale ran. Another guy who could potentially benefit here is Azeez Ojulari if he stays healthy. That's the big thing with Azeez Ojulari. Now, Ojulari was supposed to be the bookend to Kayvon Thibodeau. That did not happen because Ojulari just could not stay on the field. He's going to get one last crack, really, to show that he can be what they thought he could be when they drafted him. But the kid's got to stay healthy. So in Azeez Ojulari, you're probably going to see a situational pass rusher role for him. And that could potentially benefit him because, look, playing, the majority of the snaps in a game, obviously, physically, he's not up to it. But perhaps playing a reduced role where he's getting like a handful of snaps in certain situations, that might just benefit him. And they might be able to get a little bit more out of him than they have, the last 3 years. Okay, on the offensive side of the ball, I'm going to go with the two young offensive linemen, Josh Ezeudu and Marcus McKethan. I'm going to start with Ezeudu. Now, I mentioned in the first segment how Ezeudu was thrown into the mix at left tackle late in the process last year. I think he started practicing at left tackle actually leading up to week 1 of the regular season last year, kind of working as the backup, which I found interesting, by the way, because, the Giants kept Matt Parrott on the roster, but yet they didn't really have the confidence to put Parrott in there when they needed to. So Joshua Ezeudu has been working at left tackle. He's been working inside at guard, left guard. They're getting him ready, and he's been benefiting from the added rep, from the preparation. None of this, oh my God, we've got to panic now and we've got to throw him in there and hope that that his muscle memory from playing offensive tackle in college kicks in. No, they're kind of handling this the right way. And it's the same thing with Marcus McKethan, who, was a college tackle, can also play guard. They're cross training him. It goes back to what I said in the other segment about Carmen Brasillo and how they are cross training these guys to be able to play multiple roles. Because if you're going to be a reserve, you better be able to play multiple roles, especially on the offensive line. One other guy I'm going to give you who I think might benefit from the coaching change, and actually he's going to benefit, I think, more so if Darren Waller retires, and that's Lawrence Cager. Lawrence Cager, the tight end. Look, if Waller retires, as is expected to be the case, your top two tight ends will be Daniel Bellinger and Theo Johnson, the rookie. But I think potentially Cager has an opportunity to be the third tight end. Now, it's all going to boil down to, I think, what Bellinger delivers. All right. I say that because in Bellinger, I think what they're looking for with him is, can he be a better blocker than he was last year? I think the same thing can be said of Theo Johnson. Can he block? Look, these days, it's very rare that you find a tight end who can be, efficient in both blocking and as a pass receiver. I think Cager, I wouldn't say Cager is much of a blocker, but if you're looking for, the advantage he does have over, say, Chris Manhertz and Jack Stoll, I think, he's a little bit better pass catcher. So Cager, I think, could stand to benefit. I wouldn't put him in the same category necessarily as the two offensive linemen or the two, outside linebackers, but something to keep an eye on. And it depends on what the Giants want to get out of the offensive skill players. And, if they feel that they need to have another blocker or a guy, who is purely a blocker at that tight end position. All right. Coming up next, folks, let's take a look at where the Giants stand cap-wise. I mentioned Darren Waller is probably going to retire. What does that do for the cap? And how could they potentially spend it to benefit them before, they start the 2024 season? That's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, it's winner takes all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. If you're like me and you're liking the New York Rangers odds of winning the Stanley Cup, you'll want to be part of the action. Right now, when you sign up for an account with FanDuel, you will get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And in this segment, June 1st is rapidly approaching. Why is that significant? Because any major transactions that are done as far as retirements, as far as cap cuts, if you wait till June 1st or after June 1st, you tend to save a lot more than you would if you made that transaction a pre-June 1st move. Now, I mention that because Darren Waller, the tight end, still has not made it official as to what he plans to do. I still say he's going to retire. The longer this goes on, the more I'm convinced that they're waiting for after June 1st, because look, they can't spend the money until after June 1st anyway. So they might as well say, hey, Darren, take your time. Just let us know sometime after June 1st so we can decide how we're going to approach the roster if we need to make some tweaks. So where do the Giants stand cap-wise? Glad you asked. Currently, according to Over the Cap, the Giants are ranked last in cap space with $1.126 million. That ain't going to be enough to get them through the season. Not in the least. So if Waller were to return, they would probably have to restructure a couple of contracts. The first one being Andrew Thomas's. And I haven't even looked at how they would restructure that, but Thomas has a couple of years within his extension to where, the prorated signing bonus doesn't extend beyond a certain period. So if we got to that, I would work that out for you, but I don't think we're going to need to do that just quite this year. So if Waller retires and is a post-June 1st transaction, the Giants will save $11.6 million on the deal. All right, so that would give them about $12.7 million to work with. Plenty of money to get them through the regular season, to get them through training camp if they have to sign guys due to injuries, or if they want to add somebody. Now, here's the thing, folks. Would the Giants spend, or should they spend, and if so, on who and what position? Okay, I have a theory here. Now, if you watched the show yesterday, I mentioned one of the position groups that I'm still a little iffy on. And this is just my take. The coaches obviously will feel differently, but this is just my take. I'm still a little iffy on the cornerback depth. All right. I know that the coaches have faith in Cordell Flott to start alongside Deonte Banks. Fine. Okay. I think Flott can probably do it. I do have concerns about can he hold up to the physical aspects of it. But as I pointed out yesterday, if the Giants were so gung-ho about Cordell Flott, why did they attempt on 2 different occasions to bring in a veteran? All right. So that being said, the Giants last year, they tried to roll with the youth movement, and it didn't quite work out for them. They had to, go back and put Adoree Jackson, move him from the slot and put him back on the outside when Trey Hawkins, who had looked so good in training camp, whom they also said they had confidence in, didn't work out. So that being said, what happens then if there's an injury or if Cordell Flott does not work out? Who do they plug in there? They have David Long, who they signed, but I'm going to give you the name of somebody who is still a free agent and who I think might make for a good signing if they need to bring him in at cornerback. That individual is, drumroll please, it is Akello Witherspoon. All right, 6'2", 195 pounds, third-round draft pick in 2017 of the San Francisco 49ers, has a career reception allowed rate of 55.6, has allowed only 27 touchdowns in his career. Good veteran signing if the Giants can swing it. Now, we're at a point now where there are several free agents out there, several veteran free agents who are out there who maybe, they would rather train on their own. They want to skip, the rigors of mini camps and training camps and all that stuff. But if the Giants figure that, this plan to go with Cordell Flott doesn't quite fit, I would see about bringing in Witherspoon. To me, I think he could be a really good addition to the defense. And look, the Giants, the fact that they changed defensive coordinators and they're going to do fewer exotic blitzes from the cornerback and the safeties, they still need those guys to be able to cover. I think Cordell Flott can do it. My concern again is, can he hold up? And as I've said before, if there is injury to that position, the Giants, in my opinion, are going to have a problem. I don't feel good about the depth that they have there. It's not a slight against, the other guys that they had, the Aaron Robinsons, the Nick McLeods. That's not a slight against them. Aaron Robinson hasn't been able to get on the field. He's got to be so far behind at this point that I just don't know that he can step in and be the answer for them if he is called upon. Nick McLeod, I think he could be a temporary solution, but would I want to see him full-time and take him off of special teams, to accommodate? I don't know about that. I don't think I would, but that's not my call to make, obviously. So Witherspoon would be a guy that I would look to bring in if I were the Giants, using some of that money that's going to be cleared out from Darren Waller when he does retire, or assuming that he does retire. So even if they bring in Witherspoon and, they put him on a 1-year deal that's incentive laden, that's better than nothing. And they would still have enough money, I think, to get them through the rest of the summer, to get them through a good part of the 2024 season. So to me, that would kind of be a no-brainer if they can swing it. All right, Giant fans, that is going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. I'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode of Locked On Giants. Until then, have a great one, everybody.